You spoke about Nico Jackson, who has had a lack of goals so far. I think he's struggled slightly with his form. I remember we spoke about it, I think, on the last episode or a previous episode about when he was subbed off against Spurs and the I don't know what you want to call it, the disappointment in him.
Yeah, the emotion and the disappointment.
The emotion. Now, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the John Obi Mikel podcast recently as well. He's come back and said that, we need someone that's going to be scoring the goals. He still thinks, John Obi Mikel thinks that isn't Nicholas Jackson. Nicholas Jackson isn't good enough to be our striker. He needs competition, is what the words that I think Mikel used recently. Do you agree with that still? Because I know you was of the opinion that we should be okay with Nicholas Jackson and Mark Gu for the remainder of the season. But is that opinion changed of yours now that we might need to consider bringing someone else in?
It's hard to pin the blame entirely on Nicholas Jackson during that kind of form, that kind of dip in form, because I think there's a lot of other factors that contributed to it. But I do agree, like I said, he only got 1 goal in 6. But you look at Erling Haaland, I think from between October and maybe mid-December, he went through a bit of a goal drought, lived like a shadow of himself. So it does happen to the best strikers. I do still think there's no way I'm going to compare Nicholas Jackson to an Erling Haaland or a Lewandowski or a Viktor Gyökeres, because he's nowhere near that level yet, I believe. I do think there's a really good player there. Is he the player that can really get us into the Champions League? And once we're in the Champions League, get us to a semi-final or final? I don't know. I don't think he is, potentially. I know that I listened to the same John Obi Mikel podcast episode that you did, and he mentions both the Victors, the Viktor Osimhens and the Viktor Gyökeres as the 2 guys he would love to see at Chelsea. So yeah, I do think should these kind of problems persist through his form and his lack of clinicalness in front of goal, then maybe I would kind of look into the transfer market. But I don't think that should be an immediate need this January. 100% not. I think we should focus on that in the summer if it's needed. I think this January, what we need to get right is a centre back. With Badiashile out till end of February, we've got Wesley Fofana out potentially to the rest of the season. He's mentioning it's only a couple of weeks, so there's still a bit of a miscommunication in how long his injury is going to last for. We've got Disasi, who might as well just be shipped out to Saudi Arabia right now. And then we've recorded Aaron Anselmino from his Mono Boca Juniors, but still uncertain whether we're going to keep him, loan him back out to a European team, if he's going to feature the youth team, whether he's ready, we don't know. And I'll be completely honest, I've never watched this guy in my life, so I don't know what he's capable of. Then we're going to talk about a bit the options we're linked to in the Premier League as centre backs, but yeah, that should be our immediate need. I do like Jackson. I did feel like we saw in moments at the start of this season what he can offer and the type of striker that we signed from Villarreal, but he just needs to be a bit more consistent, and these dips in form will happen, but now it's all about how he bounces back.
I was probably, obviously when a goal scorer is scoring goals, you back him, of course you do. But I think looking at other strikers, I'm looking even at a Alexander Isak at the moment, who is performing really well for Newcastle. Erling Haaland, who yes isn't scoring week in week out, but he's still top goal scorer in the Premier League. I'm looking at Viktor Gyökeres for Sporting, who scores for fun. I think he's got 20 and 19 games in the league or something silly. Viktor Osimhen, I think, has only played 10 games, I think, for Galatasaray in the league, but he's got 13 goals this season. So I'm looking at their return, per match to goals, and the ratio is really better than what I think Nicholas Jackson's on 19 games. I think 9 goals, I think, something like that. So it just isn't, for me, just isn't good enough to be the primary striker this season and next season. I think you look at, like I said, other strikers, even look at how Liam Delap. I just look at the physique of the ability, the holding up of the ball, just everything about Liam Delap. I'm not saying we should sign him at all. I don't think he, I did a video yesterday on our strikers, but I don't think he should be in the conversation. But I just think even Solanke for the goal against Liverpool the other day, just Nicholas Jackson doesn't have that in him to be able to hold the ball up and look for the runner of Bergvall, like Solanke did against Spurs. It just doesn't. I don't know. I just don't trust Nicholas Jackson to be the primary striker. He's still very young, still very raw. I do think he needs someone to learn from. That could be a Viktor Osimhen, could be Viktor Gyökeres, could be Alexander Isak. It could be any of those 3. but I also think he needs competition. I think when you're the primary person in a position, we saw it with Alonso, and I think it was Ben Chilwell at one point, when one got injured, the other one sort of dipped up a little bit. And then as soon as Ben Chilwell came back, that competition was there again. They're both fighting for the left back position. You need that in every position. You need it in midfield, you need it in defence, you need it as a goalkeeper. You definitely need it as a striker, because if you become a bit more complacent, a bit more, who's going to replace me? Mark Gu doesn't seem to be in Maresca's plans in the league. We don't play in Kunku as the 9, who didn't work. It hasn't worked all season. We can't play Cole Palmer there. So there isn't really any other option but to play Nico Jackson. And when you haven't got anyone to compete with, you do probably become a little bit complacent. You think, you know what, it's just me here. You know, the manager's got to play me because there isn't another option. If he had competition, if he had a Gyökeres, if he had an Isak, if he had Osimhen, that was there willing to compete for that spot, I think we might see a bit more from Jackson. And I think it comes down to that. I really do.
We've always had it. You look at all our striker partnerships or kind of trios of strikers we had down in the last decade or so. Drogba has Anelka to compete with.
Yeah.
Then he eventually had Torres. Torres then had Demba Ba. And then he had, I think, Samuel Eto'o at one point. Yeah. Then you look after, he had Diego Costa, who had Michy Batshuayi and Loic Remy. And even Didier Drogba came back to the club to kind of offer his experience and his competitiveness. So we've always had kind of like 3 strikers to choose from. And this is probably the first season or in the last couple of years when you've been looking at like Aubameyang and Kai Havertz. We've never really had healthy competition for any of these strikers. I know that Maresca's come out recently and said that he plans to give Mark Gui minutes in the Premier League. Yeah, maybe that could be the competition that Jackson needs to show that his spot isn't guaranteed. So yeah, I think I could be agree with what you said. You need some competition for him, and you need a world-class striker. And I always ask this question: it's like, would I want Nicolas Jackson to be our striker in the Champions League final? And right now, the answer is no.
I wouldn't have him in the Conference League final this rate, to be fair. It's a joke. But I mean, I said it yesterday. You know, is he going to win us the Premier League? No. Is he going to win us the Champions League? I don't think he could. We can't go into next season with, and this is no criticism to Nicolas Jackson at all, but we can't go into next season. You know, you're looking at City; they're already in the shop market. You know, buying left, right, centre. Liverpool will go in at some point. I know whatever happens to Mo Salah, they're still going to try and go in and bolster their team. United will probably do the same. Ruben Amorim definitely needs targets there for him. So I do think we can't rely on Nicolas Jackson next season. Especially if we do make top 4, we have to have a clinical goal scorer. Now,